So, hello everybody. I'm Professor Yuval Harari from the Department of History. And we've heard today quite a lot about the promises and wonderful opportunities of the 21st century. And I want to talk for a bit about some of the challenges and some of the more frightening scenarios ahead of us. And I don't have much time, so I would leave aside familiar challenges that you have heard a lot about, such as nuclear war and such as climate change. And I want to focus on a less familiar, but perhaps even more scary challenge, which is the rise of digital dictatorships. Digital dictatorships may rise not due to what is happening in far-off places in some third world countries, but due to what is happening in places just like this, just like the Hebrew University, in our laboratories and classrooms. Digital dictatorship may rise due to the merger of biotech with infotech. When you merge biotechnology with information technology, with big data algorithms, what you get is the ability to hack human beings. There is a lot of talk these days about hacking computers and hacking email accounts and smartphones and bank accounts, but we are really living in the era of hacking human beings. Now, what do you need in order to hack a human? You need two things. You need a lot of computing power, and you need a lot of data, especially biometric data, about what is happening inside the body or inside the brain of that human. Now, throughout history, nobody had the necessary computing power and the necessary biological understanding. Even if the Spanish Inquisition or the Soviet KGB followed you around 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, they did not know, they did not have the biological understanding of what was actually happening in the most important place, inside your body, inside your brain, and they did not have the computing power necessary to make sense even of the information they were able to gather in you. But this is now changing, as we've just seen in some of the previous talks. Advances in computer science, especially in machine learning and AI, give us, or at least some of us, the necessary computing power. And at the same time, advances in biology, especially brain science, are giving us the necessary biological insight into what's happening inside us, inside our brains. And when you put the two together, enough computing power and enough biometric knowledge, biometric data, what you get is algorithms that can understand humans better than humans can understand themselves. The big insight of our era is that organisms are algorithms, and given enough power, an algorithm can crack an organism. And an organism includes Homo sapiens. It's not just the cows and the chickens, it's also us. And it's not so difficult, it's not impossible to get to know a person better than that person knows himself or herself, because most people don't really know themselves very well. There are many things, very important things, we don't know about ourselves. To give one example, a personal example, when I was 21, I finally realized that I was gay after several years of living in denial. And that's hardly exceptional. Lots of gay men spend their entire teenage years not knowing something extremely important about themselves. Now fast forward 10 or 20 years and imagine the situation when an algorithm can tell any teenager exactly where he or she is on the gay-straight spectrum. They just show you a couple of maybe videos of attractive men and women and track your eye movements, monitor your brain activity, your blood pressure, and tells you within 5 minutes exactly where you are on the gay-straight spectrum. Now, maybe you personally don't want to use such an algorithm, but what happens if you find yourself in some boring birthday party of one of your classmates, and then somebody has this wonderful idea, I just heard about this cool new algorithm that can tell your sexual identity, and wouldn't it be so interesting if everybody just take turns testing themselves on this algorithm when all the other classmates are looking and commenting? Now, what would you do? Would you just walk away? And even if you do walk away, and even if you keep hiding from yourself and from your classmates, you won't be able to hide from Amazon, from Facebook, and from the secret police. As you surf, without you knowing, as you surf the internet and read your social feed and watch videos on YouTube, the algorithms will be monitoring you and analyzing you. And then they, for example, will conclude that if they want to sell you some product in order to increase economic growth, they had better use the advertisement with the shirtless guy and not the advertisement with the shirtless girl. And you will not even know that this is happening, but they will know. They will know you better than you know yourself. And when algorithms know you better than you know yourself, they cannot just predict your desires and wishes. They can also manipulate your emotions and even take decisions on your behalf. And the result might be the formation of digital dictatorships. Now, in the 20th century, democracy defeated dictatorship or outperformed dictatorship largely because democracy was better at processing data and making decisions. We don't tend to think about it in those terms. We tend to think that the battle between democracy and dictatorship was about ethics. There are different ethical systems. But actually, it was also, or even primarily, a battle of data processing. Democracy and dictatorship are two different methods for processing data. Democracy works by distributing information and the power to make decisions between many individuals and many organizations. It's a distributed system. Dictatorship works by concentrating all the information and all the power in one place. It's a centralized data processing system. Now, given the technological conditions of the 20th century, it was simply inefficient to try and concentrate too much data and too much power in one place. Nobody could process the information fast enough and well enough. And this is the main reason why, for example, the United States outperformed the Soviet Union, why the American economy, why the free market outperformed the command and control economy of the Soviet Union. There is a story about a Soviet official that in the late 1980s came to visit London to see how the free market and how a liberal democracy actually functions. And the British hosts, they took their Soviet guest on a tour of London to see all the banks and the stock exchange and to meet all kinds of economics professors and philosophy professors. But after a few hours, the Soviet official said, "Wait a minute. There is something I don't understand. Back home in Moscow, we have our best minds working on the problem of how to provide bread to Moscow. And nevertheless, in almost every bakery and grocery store, there is such a long queue for bread. Here in London, a city of millions, we've been going back and forth across the city for the whole day now, and we haven't seen a single bread queue. So please cancel all my other appointments and meetings and visits and just take me to meet the person who is in charge of providing bread to London. I must understand his secret." And the British hosts, they scratch their heads and they look in embarrassment and they say, "Well, there is nobody. There is nobody in charge of providing bread to London." And that's the secret of success of a distributed system for processing information. Nobody is in charge. You just allow the information to flow freely between many individuals and organizations and allow them to make their own decision. And this is why the free market outperformed the Soviet economy. But it is not a law of nature that centralized systems are always worse, less efficient than distributed systems. It was only the case in the 20th century. Now, the revolution in information technology and also in biotechnology, especially the rise of AI and machine learning, might swing the pendulum in the opposite direction and might make centralized data processing systems far more efficient than distributed data processing systems. And then the main handicap of authoritarian regimes in the 20th century, their attempt to concentrate all information in one place, it might become their decisive advantage in the 21st century. And at present, we are indeed seeing more and more attempts to create these centralized data systems and even total surveillance regimes that follow everybody around all the time, collecting all possible data on them. And we see it not just in authoritarian regimes, like in China or Russia or North Korea, but also in democratic countries. For instance, the United States is building perhaps the most comprehensive global surveillance system in the world, whereas Israel is trying to build very close to here, a total surveillance regime in the occupied West Bank. Our country has a very vibrant high-tech sector, and it's a leading cybersecurity nation, the startup nation, and at the same time, as we all know, it is also locked into deadly conflict with the Palestinians. And there are many Israeli politicians and generals and citizens who will be extremely happy to establish a total surveillance regime in the West Bank immediately when they have the technology. Already today, Palestinians are hardly able to make a phone call or to post something on Facebook or to travel from one city to another, let's say from Ramallah to Hebron, without being monitored by Israeli microphones or cameras or drones or spy software. The gathered data is then analyzed with the help of big data algorithms, like we saw in the previous talk. And this helps the Israeli security to pinpoint and neutralize potential threats, or what they consider to be potential threats, without placing too many boots on the ground. The Palestinians may administer some villages and towns in the West Bank, but the Israelis have almost complete control of the sky, of the airwaves, and of cyberspace. And this is what enables a relatively small number of Israeli soldiers to effectively control about 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank. And Israel is becoming one of the world leaders in the field of controlling and subduing resentful civilian populations. And it is exporting this knowledge and this technology to various regimes across the world, and not only to democratic regimes. What the Palestinians are currently experiencing in the West Bank might be just a primitive preview for what billions of people will eventually experience all over the world. A related danger is that the merger of biotech and infotech and the rise of total surveillance regimes might make democracy not just less efficient than dictatorships, but actually meaningless. Democracy is based not on human rationality, it is based on human feelings. In referendums and elections, people are not being asked, "What do you think?" They are asked, "What do you feel?" It's decided by human emotions. What happens when an external algorithm cannot just know my emotions, but manipulate them very effectively? Then democracy becomes just an emotional puppet show, without people even realizing that this is happening. Politicians are a bit like musicians. And the instrument they are playing on, and this has been for the whole of history, it's not just today, the instrument politicians play on is the human emotional system. Politician gives a speech, and there is a wave of fear all over the country. A politician tweets, and there is an explosion of hatred. Now, I don't think it is such a good idea to give these musicians more sophisticated instruments to play on our emotional system with. Hacking humans, therefore, might mean the end of liberal democracy, at least as we have known it for the last century. And scientists in all fields, but particularly in the fields of brain science and computer science, should understand what is at stake. It is their research that makes it possible, or would make it possible very soon, to hack human beings. Now, most scientists certainly have the best of intentions. Brain scientists want to cure terrible psychiatric illnesses. Computer scientists who are working, say, on AI want to produce self-driving cars, which will solve the terrible problem of human error causing traffic accidents. Today, each year, more than 1 million people are killed every year in traffic accidents caused by human error. That's more than the number of people killed by crime and war and terrorism put together. So it's a wonderful thing to replace all these fallible humans with better and safer self-driving cars. But it should be clear that the scientists are not the ones who ultimately decide what to do with their discoveries. We should therefore, as scientists, always ask ourselves not what I would do with my discovery, but what would the government or the army of Putin or the Chinese Communist Party, what will they do with my discovery? And we shouldn't sweep the problem under the carpet and say something like, well, I developed the ability to read thoughts in order to help locked-in syndrome patients. And if later on the Chinese Communist Party or the security services use this against political dissidents, well, that's not my fault. But it is, at least in part, your fault, because you are the one who developed the tool, who created this new ability. This, of course, is a very old problem in the history of science. Scientists always face the problem, the danger, that others might misuse their discoveries. But the situation now is nevertheless a bit different. Because in the past, scientists developed new tools, and it was up to the human community, it was up to human beings to decide what to do with the new tools. Now, however, the new tool that we are developing, the tool to hack human beings, means that it will no longer be up to the human community to decide what to do with our inventions and discoveries. We are creating a tool that might take away the freedom of choice from most human beings. So what should we do? What can we do? It's obvious that stopping all scientific research is not a solution. It's a terrible idea. We will miss all the wonderful opportunities that the research might bring, and in any case, it's not going to happen. What I am saying is that we should acknowledge that scientific research, especially in fields like computer science, is now a political activity, maybe the most political activity of all. It will shape the politics of the future more than anything else. And that means two things. First, that scientists should take politics more into consideration, even when they are in the laboratory. It should be part of what they are thinking about, not just as an afterthought, but as part of the research. For example, I think that any good program in computer science today should have as an integral part at least a couple of courses on the politics and ethics of writing code, writing algorithms, creating big data systems, because this will shape the future of society more than almost anything else. And computer scientists should be able, for example, to carefully consider whether they want to develop tools that work better in a distributed system, like a democracy, or whether they prefer to develop tools that work better in a top-down, centralized system. Similarly, brain scientists should consider whether they want to develop tools that help self-exploration by individuals or tools that help external large-scale systems to control individuals. So scientists should be more aware of politics in the laboratory, and at the same time, I think they should also be more politically engaged outside the laboratory. Because if we are in the business of changing the world, and we are now changing the world more than any other force in the world, then we should engage with that world we are changing. Otherwise, we might harbor and develop extremely naive assumptions about what the world will do with our discoveries and inventions. Here in the university, we are in the temple of human wisdom. But what we create here later goes outside the temple of wisdom. As scientists, we are very much aware of the wonders of human wisdom. But we should also never underestimate human stupidity. Thank you.